Shalom, everyone. We mentioned earlier in this chapter about saying Kaddish that there's a term in Yiddish, Kaddishil, which literally means like Kaddish for a little person. So when there was lots of people who were killed in pogroms and otherwise, the parents who didn't know if they will survive until their child is an adult or bar mitzvah even, they always had this term Kadishil. It's also like an endearment for your son, especially if there's only one son. And so the idea was basically that they would ask the community to teach the child to say Kaddish because a lot of the parents did not survive. So that's what this concludes this section about mourner's Kaddish. So a minor whose mother or father dies says Kaddish for his parent, though he has not yet reached the age of mitzvot, bar mitzvah. Mourner's Kaddish was instituted for that purpose, as we said the story about Rabbi Akiva, since a child cannot lead the prayer service in order to facilitate the ascent of his parent's soul, what's called Ilui Neshama. Therefore, the Chachamim instituted Kaddish, and that's what the Ramah says in Yoredea, even if the minor has not yet reached the age of understanding, which is what's called Gil Chinuch, that age 7 or 8, depends who you ask. And the Kaddish is read to him. The young orphan repeats the Kaddish word for word, and the congregation answers Amen. Especially when it's a child that didn't learn the Kaddish yet, because we don't like to do chinuch for what's called avelut, mourning, then it's usually slower and more painful, maybe even, and so the community feels the actual grief a lot stronger than usual. And the Ari in parentheses here says that it is important to be strict and have an adult say Morris Kaddish with the minor because that Kaddish is included in the 12 Kaddishim that are necessary to hear every day. I remember that there's 10 from the word tzaddik. Tzaddik is the word for righteous, but the acronym is tzadi is 90 amens. Dalet is 4 baruchus. Yud is 10 kaddishes, and Kuf is 100 blessings that you say a day. So I'm not sure what the 12 are, but in the morning there's 4, and then the Mencha Marv there's 3 each. So in the case of a man or a woman who was not privileged to leave behind the son, a God-fearing grandson may say Kaddish for him or her the whole year. This is possible even if a deceased has a son who is not God-fearing and does not go to synagogue to recite Kaddish. So basically, parents have only daughters. So if the daughters already are married and have children, so if there's a grandson, then he should say the Kaddish. A grandson from a son takes precedence over a grandson from a daughter. If the deceased does not have a grandson yet, but has a son-in-law, the son-in-law should say Kaddish. The grandson and son-in-law are permitted to say Kaddish only when one of their own parents is deceased, or if their parents agree to his reciting Kaddish while they are living. So when I became the rabbi here in Fredericton, and even though both my parents were alive, there were lots of people who died who didn't leave behind children, or if they did leave behind children, these children would not be going to synagogue. So I asked my father for permission to say Kaddish, and since he was saying Kaddish for all kinds of people, and both his parents were passed, he gave me that permission. So that's this idea about asking for permission. However, someone whose parents are strict that he not say Kaddish while they are both alive may not recite the Kaddish for his grandparent or in-law. And I really hope that people can talk about these things and communicate properly and not have fights over it, because you're not insulting anybody. If the whole community knows that your parents are alive, nobody thinks that you're considering them dead by you saying Kaddish for somebody else other than your parents. So that's just my take on this. When the deceased does not have a son, grandson, or son-in-law, the father of the deceased recites the Kaddish. If the father is also dead, which is normal, the brother or nephew says Kaddish. So basically, all these different options for people to be able to say Kaddish, because we want to fulfill that. Well, it's not really a mitzvah, but it's a very good custom. It gives them lots of honor. And there's also other laws which will be discussed in chapter 23. When none of these relatives can say Kaddish for the deceased, part of the inheritance money should be used to hire a God-fearing person to recite Kaddish for him. It is good to hire someone who is engrossed in Torah. If there's someone in the family who is occupied with Torah study, he takes precedent over a stranger. The monetary compensation for the Kaddish is important in order to ensure the fulfillment of its recital, because when people do things for free, they sometimes forget to do them. Furthermore, by employing someone who is involved in Torah or a poor person who has children to support, the deceased will acquire more merit, and again, there will be Ilui Neshama. If a minor who already reached the age of understanding passes away, his father must say Kaddish for him or her, and that's very unfortunate when you lose a child. There are those who have the custom to say Kaddish even for a small baby. So the Gil Chinuch is only because that's like an obligation, but with a nefel or a baby that died in their first 6 or 7 years, um, there's no reason for the Ilui Neshama because their soul goes straight to heaven, and because they never committed any sin, because they never got to the age of understanding. That's basically what this is about. One who hires himself out to recite Kaddish may do so for a number of people on condition that he ends up saying at least one Kaddish a day for each of the deceased. So if we follow the Ari's suggestion, and if you can go for maximum 12 people to say Kaddish for. It is proper for an adopted son to say Kaddish for his adopted parents, all the more so if the adopted parents does not have their own children. It is a mitzvah for the adopted son to say Kaddish. And last but not least, something we've already mentioned earlier in the week, it is also good for a righteous convert to Ger Tzedek to say Kaddish for his Gentile parents. And if you remember, this was in the Q&A, I said that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who wrote the Yalkut Yosef, was the chief rabbi of Israel, and in 1979 he was asked by a convert if he's allowed to say Kaddish for his parents, and Rabbi Ovadia Yosef answered, "What do you mean allowed? You must." So that's very important to remember because that's why the people converted to Judaism, in order for them to do things that are right and good, and so I don't want to end early, but I'll just mention that we just finished learning about Mor's Kaddish, and our rabbis tell us that in beginning of Parshat B'Shalach, when it says that Moses took the bones of Yosef, that all the tribes carried their own ancestor, and they were all buried in Israel, not only Yosef, but Yosef is the one who demanded that shvuah, that oath, to do that, and according to the Jewish law today, and we'll get to it one day when we talk about Avelut, the day of the reburial is considered like Shiva, and you have to sit for that day and mourn as if the father or mother died just now. And when they brought Yaakov to Egypt, it says that they from Egypt to Canaan. It says that they did a whole shiva in a place called Goren Hatad. So just wanted to end with that and to wish you all Shabbos.